Hello, everybody. Are we on? We're live?
Yes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our annual budget hearing. We will begin the meeting, per usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. A flag will appear on your screen, so those of you who can, please rise. I've been told to hold up my computer so people don't see my bill. Okay. On three. 1, 2, 3. I
Allegiance to the flag of the United
States
States of America
and
to
to the
the
republic
republic
for which
which
it
it
stands
stands, one
one
nation,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. That was not exactly in sync, but I think we got it. Okay. Mrs. Callahan, would you be so kind as to do the roll call?
Sure. Mrs. Johnson,
I'm here.
Mrs. Brooks,
Here.
Mrs. Bays,
Here.
Ms. Weisberg,
Here.
Ms. Gilliar,
Here.
Mr. Greenstein,
Here.
and Mr. Kirpin.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. I'm going to make a motion for the adoption of tonight's agenda, March 26, 2020. Do I have a second? Mr. Kirpin? Ms.
It's
Callahan?
May 26th.
Did I not say May? Oh, it says
You
March
said March.
on here. Uh-oh.
It's May.
Oh, no. Okay, everywhere else it says March. So if it doesn't talk about the budget, I'll know I have to go print something else out. No, seriously, it did say March.
Okay. Mrs. Johnson,
I guess I'm here.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein,
Yes.
and Mr. Kirpin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to give a couple of opening remarks. Again, thanks for joining us for tonight's annual budget hearing. We have some other board business to conduct, but we're going to keep that brief so that we can focus on the community's questions about the 2021 budget. The chat feature has been enabled, and here's how we hope that it will work tonight. After we go through the other business items, including a quick budget overview by Mrs. Callahan, we'll be taking questions and comments from you at the audience and responding in real time. We do have a couple of requests. Please identify yourselves by your real name, not by your screen name, when you ask a comment or a question. This is how we do it in person, as those of you who have attended live meeting know. And it's actually better for us so that we know who we're addressing when we respond. Also, and this is important too, please stick to questions about the budget. It's really important to us that as many community members as possible have an opportunity to have their budget questions answered and their budget comments heard by everyone. I know there's a lot of uncertainty out here in the community, and that's because of the ongoing crisis, of course, and how it's impacted our students and our families and the community at large. And there will be other opportunities to discuss these concerns, which are ongoing. But tonight, we really need to focus on the budget questions. The 2021 budget that the board adopted last week has the second lowest budget-to-budget increase that we've had in the last 28 years of recorded Port Washington history. As we've all said, our goal was to maintain Port's high quality of education and at the same time keep the budget as lean as possible, because we know how many people in our community are struggling financially, or in the very least have a lot of economic uncertainty going forward. I've heard that some community members believe that the budget is still too high because they're concerned about the quality of education. And on the other hand, I've heard from others who still believe that it's not low enough. Did I say, I think I got that confused. I'm going to go back on that one because I was trying to make a point, which I've said before, so everybody knows it probably. But I've heard some people say that the budget is too low because they're concerned that it's not going to provide for the high quality education that we all take pride in. On the other hand, I've heard other community members say that the budget still isn't low enough because of their very valid and shared economic concerns. To people on both ends of that continuum and to those in the middle, I just want to say that we've done our best to balance the needs of the entire community. We're one community, and we're the strongest when we listen to each other and work together. I'm looking forward to hearing people's comments and their questions. And by the way, Dave Kerpen, our resident public speaker, will be reading the questions and comments. I hope all of you have remained safe and are healthy since last week's meeting. And thank you so much again for joining us tonight. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hines.
Great. Thank you, President Johnson. I appreciate it. And as always, you articulated some of the things I wanted to say a lot more eloquently than I would or could have. So let me just start off with two items that are not related to the budget, and has to do with two pieces of information that went home today regarding some correspondence. For our seniors who are out there, and for some of the seniors who actually may be watching this broadcast right now, we are very happy to report that we not only have a cap and gown ceremony that will take place in June over 3 days, but now, as you know, on August 4th, we are looking at a live celebration for you. And I want to not only thank Dr. Pernick, Mr. Miller, and then our Gamble co-chairs who have been working tirelessly. And I know a lot of the senior parents have, you know, hoping for and wanting something. But yes, as of what we're looking at right now for August 4th, we're very, very excited about. And to our super seniors out there, Andrew, Kayla, and Ben, great job. And we're really, really excited for this to happen. And we just, you know, of course, need to make sure and listen to what the governor is saying as far as what we can do. But we have it now etched in our calendar, and we're ready to move forward. The second piece of correspondence has to do with the fourth quarter grading, and that was sent home today as well. I know there was a lot of waiting as far as what was going to happen. I think it's incredibly important to know there was a lot of thought and a lot of deliberation as far as what that entails. And so I know the correspondence went home just actually before this board meeting this evening. But finally, as President Johnson was talking about, the reason why we're here tonight has to do with the budget. And it's a budget that I'm particularly very proud of, not only because the board has been working tirelessly, as well as, you know, Mrs. Callahan and everybody else trying to make sure it is balanced. It is a student-centered budget, but it also honors the taxpayer, you know, during this very, very difficult time. So I think it was interesting that President Johnson noted that it's the second lowest budget in, you know, well over 2 decades, which I think is important to note. But as far as moving forward, you know, past this meeting, it's important that you are informed as far as, you know, what this budget entails. So please continue to check our website if you can, and then if you are able to listen to the multiple HSA school budget meetings that are taking place over the next few weeks as well. So thank you for everything that you're doing in the community, and I turn it over to you, President Johnson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like now, I'm going to ask Dr. Shields for the enrollment report.
Yes, good evening. We have a new enrollment report that came out on May 22nd. The total number of students that we have in the district is 5,395 students. That's 27 students less than we had this time last year. And we continue to monitor the enrollment for our incoming kindergarten class. That's currently at 347. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Schultz. Next, we are, okay, I'm going to make a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the May 19th, 2020 board meeting. Do I have a second? Okay, Ms. Brooks, all in favor? Mary?
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein,
Yes.
and Mr. Kerpen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Now we're up to the discussion item that I mentioned before, and that is Mrs. Callahan, and a short but important budget overview.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Our video engineer will put up my presentation, which is actually the same presentation from last week. I would like to make a few comments, however, regarding the process, because there may be some folks this evening who have not followed this process thoroughly this year. We began with public meetings in February. As a matter of fact, all of these minutes are posted and presentations appear on our website. We met again in real time in March before the pandemic, and certainly all through the budget process and through our virtual meetings. We had many budget and facilities meetings headed by Mr. Kerpen. For those of you who did see us back in February and March, we talked about proposing staffing. And at that time, we were talking about adding staffing over $500,000 to our budget. And at that time, we had a 3.98% increase. Also, as Mrs. Johnson noted, in the 28 years that I have kept records in the business office, I haven't been here for 28 years. I found 8 years worth of records when I got here. This is the second lowest budget increase. But also keep in mind that over those 28 years, every year our enrollment has grown. So all to say that this is truly a work that is very much like a negotiation, where I don't think anyone is 100% happy, but no one is 100% disappointed. At least I hope not, because we truly worked very hard on this budget. And for those of you who have looked at the 52-page document, I am sure there are folks who could say, well, there's no reason to have money in a travel code, or there's no reason to have money in a supervision code or a field trip code, because we're in this unknown state of pandemic. This budget was crafted with the sense that we would be returning to school in the fall. And as I said at a prior meeting, the board does have policies in place to move monies within the budget from various budget codes that may not happen. We may not need supervision for athletics in the fall if we are not in school. But that money will not go to waste, and it will not be spent unnecessarily either, because the Board of Education has a policy that indicates over a certain dollar amount, funds that are transferred must be approved by them. So I will just briefly now go through the 2 pages of last week's presentation, if it can open up for us, which shows all of the items we can go right past the cover page, please. These are all of the items that really needed to be cut in order to get us to a 1.66% budget increase. There have been enormous cuts made in the building codes for supplies and equipment, repairs, all the things that keep the buildings humming in terms of instruction. And at Salem, we had been talking for months about putting several $1 million into a code to replace 3 different roofs in our schools. Now we are doing a partial roof replacement at Salem, and we are doing a partial roof replacement at the high school and or Sousa, depending on which area needs the work the most. But that did allow us to take over $1 million out of the budget. We were going to do track resurfacing. We were going to plan for some asbestos removal only if necessary. We've taken buildings and grounds equipment out. You can really read this entire list. I don't need to go through it all, but I think that the one thing that the board worked very hard at through this whole process was to do the least harm to the children and to the individuals who provide the services to children. We had started out thinking that we were going to need to cut our STEAM program, and the board came up with some creative ideas for doing something different to make up that money. And rather than eliminating substitute teachers altogether, we have eliminated a different category of substitute teachers that cost us extra dollars, but still offers us the opportunity to call in substitute teachers as needed. So we go through this whole list and we come up with $2.4 million of reductions. And I am ready to go to the next page. The next page shows us the final option the board did adopt and what we believe the average tax impact will be. And I say what we believe because we received tentative assessment information from the county. These numbers are not finalized until October, so it's difficult to say whether in fact in October the numbers will be the same. Keep in mind also the county has reassessed properties this year, so a number of people have had reductions in assessment while others have had increases in assessment. If your house is probably around a $900,000 market value, then you are probably in this area that's called the average home. So if your house is valued at less, you will see a smaller increase. If your house is valued at double that 900,000, you will see an increase twice the amount that appears on the screen. And also, as I spoke about, no one is especially happy about the budget increase. No one's especially unhappy. You will see that we have an allowable levy increase according to the state formula that was at least almost 1.5% higher than what the board is going out to ask the community to bear. Certainly keeping in mind this is a difficult time economically for many people who reside in Port Washington. If I could just have the next slide. This shows you, at least as of May 13th, where the surrounding districts were relative to what their budget increases were going to be and their levy increases. More than half have levy increases under 2%, but you do see that there is one district that has a levy increase of over 3%. And these are the districts we always compare ourselves to in our per pupil spending every year. We are still number 11 out of 12 in per pupil spending, meaning the lowest, not the highest, 11 out of 12 among these districts that I am showing to you now. And next year we will probably be very close to the same range. And the last slide is the term contingency, which is one that I never like to even utter, let alone think could possibly happen in Port Washington. But the way the formula works, if the community does not feel it can support our budget for whatever reason, normally we would have a second opportunity to review any numbers or to make a better case than what we have made thus far to convince more people to support the budget for the students. However, this year, there really both has not been a date given by the governor, nor does there appear to potentially be the opportunity, because the fiscal year ends on June 30th and our vote is on June 9th. We could never redo the budget and send out another round of absentee ballots to 22,000 people in time to have a second vote. So contingency then means that the levy cannot be raised from what it is now. That means there's no increase at all to the taxpayer, not the 1.99% that we're proposing. And what does that mean? It means that the budget we have designed, we need to remove $2.8 million. The law clearly says we need to eliminate equipment and the transfer to capital line. And then that leaves us with another $1 million that would need to be cut. And the board would meet and have those discussions in public, whether it would be more programs, whether it would be staffing, whether it would be athletics, drama. I can't begin to even imagine the discussion, but you are certainly, as a community, entitled to have this information and knowledge to know the very importance of exercising your right to vote on June 9th. That is the extent of the presentation, and I don't know if the board has any questions before the community feed, but I'm happy to answer whatever you pass on to me.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Ms. Callahan, when you say non-mandated, that could also include kindergarten, is that correct? That's not mandated. I'm not sure if there are any language programs in our school that we give that are not mandated. Our research programs at the high school are not mandated. Our STEAM program is not mandated. Our before and after school clubs are not mandated. Our after school athletics are not mandated. Are those some of the examples that you mean?
Those would all be items that the board would request the costs associated so that they could be viewed and weighed against other possibilities. Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Any other questions? Okay, we'll just run through the rest of the meeting so we could leave the rest of the time for questions. We had, I think did we have I don't know that we need to talk about the budget meeting if we had one since last week, but we didn't have one anyway, right? We had it on Monday and the meeting was Tuesday. We did have a curriculum committee meeting. Rachel, did you want to say a few words about that?
Yes. We did have a curriculum committee meeting last Thursday, May 21st, I believe. Dr. Hines and an army of administrators came to talk about the remote learning plan and things that they've seen in their various buildings. We had several principals with us. We also had the head of pupil personnel and the head of our ENL program talking about the impact in those specific groups of children. I kind of think that I can't do the update justice by trying to give an update here. It was live streamed. If you'd like to hear Dr. Hines and Dr. Westerfeld and everybody else speaking in more detail about the current remote learning plan and the plans that are being made to go forward into the fall if necessary, I suggest that you watch it on the live stream. If you have questions or comments after you've watched it, you are always welcome to email the entire board at boe@portnet.org, or me as head of the curriculum committee, which is R. Gilliar at portnet.org. I look forward to hearing any additional comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. It looked like you were going to say something.
No, I'm hoping that we may be able to have another curriculum committee meeting, but nothing is scheduled. We should have talked about it before, so I would have a concrete update. We will
Okay.
update the community as it happens.
We will definitely get the word out when we schedule another one. Okay, no other committee reports. We'll just go through the consent agenda. Items 10.1, then we're skipping items 10.3 because there is nothing under, I'm sorry, 10.2, there are no action items. 10.3 curriculum, there are several. 10.4, none. So it's actually just 10.1 budget and fiscal and 10.3. I'm going to make a motion to adopt those two items with their adjoining resolutions, accompanying resolutions. Do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Kirpin, all in favor? Oh, we have to go through.
Mrs. Johnson,
I'm going to raise my hand and say yes.
Ms. Brooks.
Yes.
Oh, I lost my place. Ms. Gilliar.
Yes.
Sorry. Ms. Weisberg.
Yes.
Ms. Bays.
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Mr. Kirpin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any old or new business? No. Okay, good. So now we get to the point of community comments. How many community members are online? I'm not able to see it on my device.
139, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, thank you. And has the chat begun?
Yes, it has, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, well, Mr. Kirpin, would you start, please?
I'd be happy to, President Johnson. I'm going to read off any comments and questions that are relevant to the budget. And
Oh, no.
we will answer questions time allows. Okay, so Michael Meehan is first, and he asks, there are $500,000 of pandemic needs as part of the budget. What sorts of costs related to the pandemic would draw from those funds? I will begin, and then I'll ask you to fill in the blanks, Ms. Callahan. One thing I would note as an example would be if we need to purchase mandatory masks for students. That would be an example. Ms. Callahan, anything you'd like to add?
Well, certainly, in addition to masks, there could be gloves. There have been foggers that we have purchased and may have to continue purchasing. I have also seen that there is equipment to be used on fields for public meetings to spray in larger areas. I think the board also, in putting a lump sum of $500,000 in, was doing that also for unanticipated expenses. We do have transportation, of course, in line for next year, but if based on social distancing, we need to run additional routes, whether it be to the Daly School or to Chaminade High School, where we have over 49 students currently on the bus. Those are costs yet to be determined based on our plan for September and any directives given to us by the governor or the state ed department.
And hand sanitizer stations is another item that we have talked about, which would be throughout the building, should we be going back.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan and Ms. Johnson. Next up is, and I remind you, because I am skipping over things that are unrelated to the budget. Next up is Edina Abijic Falco, who asks, can it also be shared publicly for all to see? I'm going to assume that you're talking about Ms. Callahan's presentation, and yes, it has been posted on our website. I will go ahead and post a link here in the chat. Ms. Callahan, am I correct in stating that this presentation is on our website now?
Yes, and so is the draft 52-page budget.
Fantastic. I will post that in the chat. If any board members beat me to it, feel free to do that as well. Next up, Rebecca Hughes Parker asks, what is affected by the $68,800 field trip transportation cut if some travel is able to resume next school year? Elementary trips to museums, middle school and high school trips to academic competitions. I will take first stab at that. Those trips would be funded perhaps by our HSAs. Ms. Callahan, anything you'd like to add?
I would hope that those field trips might take place more towards the spring of the school year, and we would have a much better idea of whether we had to use some of that pandemic money. As I previously said, the board does have the authority to move money from one code to another, but there is no getting around the fact that this is an extremely tight budget that did have a lot of money removed from it. So we will have to wait and watch and see how it moves forward.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. Next up is Hank Ratner, who asks, what is the dollar amount allocated for substitute teachers in this budget? What is the current, I know we cut the permanent subs. Ms. Callahan, what is the current dollar amount allocated for substitute teachers in this new budget?
I believe it is $700,000 and change, but it's 700,000, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan.
Excuse me 1 second. I just wanted to add, because I don't think we brought this up, there's still uncertainty about the amount of state aid that we're going to be receiving. So that's another unknown that we have no control over for now. My understanding is that we're supposed to hear by the end of May, although that number has been pushed back several times already. And for those who don't know, we rely on state aid normally for about 6%, a little bit more maybe now, for our budget, which equates to over $10 million. And we have heard that that was to be cut 20%. There are questions about that. We don't know if it's going to be that much. We don't know if it's going to be more. And we don't know if it's going to be distributed evenly, if it's 20% across every district, which seems unlikely given varying needs of districts for their state aid. So that's another unknown that we will be contending with over the course. Well, hopefully we'll have certainty within the next couple of weeks, but that is another unknown. I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Just a reminder before I continue, if you can, please identify your first and last name. If it is not clear in your screen name, that would be helpful for the public record. and I do not know the last name, of course, of the following person, but I will identify her here as Susan B., who asks which elementary school is having a section accessed. Ms. Callahan or Dr. Hines, which is the elementary school having a section accessed per the new budget? Or Dr. Shiva?
No, I can answer that. It's Sousa.
Thank you. Sousa Strong. Michael Meehan asks, what's driving the $1.46 million increase for private contracts? Is that the Salem roof repair? Thanks. I think you are referring, and again, Ms. Callahan, I'll have you fill in the gaps, but I think you are actually referring to the savings. But Ms. Callahan, what can you?
Could you reread the question?
Of course. The question is, what's driving the $1.46 million increase for private contracts?
I believe that is transportation contracts that may be being discussed there. We have an in-district transportation provider, and we have multiple contractors for out-of-district transportation to private and parochial schools. As of this year, our in-district provider, was no longer willing to renew on an annual basis, and we were required to go out for an RFP. The bidder, the singular bidder that we had, caused half of that increase. The other half is, again, based on transportation contracts, but for the private and parochial schools, because there is an issue with those contractors not renewing with us for September either. And this is all being done through a bid process, but we do have to anticipate what we see around us as increases, which have been anywhere from 20 to 30%.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. Next is Lee Heather. And Heather, I was dying to know if I was hoping you would be one of the people to identify yourself by name, so I would know if it's Lee and Heather or Lee Heather or Heather Lee. But I'll go with Lee Heather for now. And Lee Heather asks, can you explain the issue of the board moving funds? I will ask Ms. Callahan to explain again what you meant when you referred to the board having the discretion here.
The Board of Education is the governing body of the school district. They have policies and procedures. Their policies are all on the school district website. Clearly, when you look in the 6,000 series, which is all business related, you will see the policies that deal with budget and transfers within these variety of budgetary codes. Anything under $5,000, I, as the business official, have the authority to move. Anything up to $10,000, the superintendent has the ability to move. Those copies of those transfers are all given to the Board of Education on a monthly basis. And anything from $10,000 and above requires approval by the Board of Education by resolution at a public board meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. Next is Hank Ratner again. Hank asks, if a school cannot open in the fall, is there money available in the budget for the purchase of Chromebooks for those students in need? I would say that that theoretically money could come from the $500,000 that we are allocating for pandemic-related costs. But I would also note, Hank, that we are going to have leftover money from this year's budget, and are going to very likely look at a solution that you speak of to add some Chromebooks. I don't know if Dr. Hines, you want to add anything, or anyone wants to add anything on that. Please jump in.
Yeah, no, I could add something. Thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head as far as looking at potential monies to do that. I think that the big thing is, and it's not just, I think, students who are in need. I think when it comes to, again, not to get into what will happen in the fall, but as far as the plan moving forward, it's going to require, I think, a lot of different technologies in order for us to be where we want to be. So it's students who are in need, and not only of the technology as far as the Chromebooks themselves, it's the Wi-Fi, it's the access, having to make sure that, when teachers are interacting, that they can be on the receiving end of that. So there's a whole host of things that we're looking at from a hardware and software standpoint, and I'm looking forward to sharing that shortly.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. This is a great question. I'm actually, it's my favorite question that has been asked throughout this budget process. I'm very excited to share it. Rachel Petticini asks, can the board members and Dr. Hines, so get ready, board members, feel free to all jump in here briefly. Can the board members and Dr. Hines let us know their biggest concern in this budget that parents should be aware of? What is your biggest concern in this budget that parents should be aware of? I'll go first, since I am the budget facilities chair. And then I will ask members of the board. I'll jump back over to the chat and ask you guys to just go in the order of the chat, so that so you guys can post in the chat there to help us have some order on answering this question. My biggest concern is probably the roof work. We spent a lot of time investigating what's necessary to improve and or fix the roofs that are in great need. And we believe we do have a solid solution for now. But it's sort of like necessity is the mother of invention. If we didn't have the economic climate that we had, I would certainly have pushed for more work, more dollars to be allocated towards roof repairs. Obviously, I do believe, at the end of the day, that we have an adequate solution in place for Salem, and I have no crystal ball, so I have no way of imagining it. But that's probably my primary concern. And I turn now to Emily, followed by Deb, Rachel, Dr. Hines, and Nora.
Thank you, Dave. My concern is that this budget has been trimmed in many different areas in many different ways, and we did that so that we could be presenting the community with a budget that we felt was in line with the current financial situation that we've all been faced with. And my concern is that if state aid does get diminished, we will be in bigger trouble than we want to be in. As you all know, as part of the legislative task force, we've been working tirelessly to alert our legislators and thereby the governor that poor Washington does not get their fair share of state aid. And we've been warned that we're going to lose the state aid that we've been given this year, which was already not what we had hoped for. So that is my concern, is that something happens along the way, our state aid is cut, and then we will be faced with, again, some uncertain times.
Thank you, Emily. Deb?
Thank you. I echo your concern with the roofs, and because we really deliberated a lot over those roofs, and we had two goals. One was to repair the roofs as fiscally efficiently and prudently as possible in terms of how we repaired the roofs, but also how we paid for that. And we deliberated quite a bit over whether to take out a bond or whether to do it as a transfer to capital. And we looked at the time value of money and the payout over time, and we came down to the transfer of capital, and now we've whittled that away. So that's probably my largest concern with the budget as we have put forward. My bigger concern is the budget not passing. And I was researching this, and I happened to come across, I'm just getting my computer, an article that was written in the Schreiber Times back in 2005, when I believe was the last time, I want to say the last time was the time the budget failed in my lifetime here. And there were a substantial number of cuts, and this article in the Schreiber Times outlines the cuts. And my daughter was starting kindergarten about 3 years later. And I remember one of the things on the list of supplies to bring was a ream of copy paper. And I was new to all of this and I didn't understand it. And now I do, because the district couldn't even afford to provide copy paper. And so the parents of the school children had to bring it. That's a minor thing, but it was just astounding to me as a new parent. And we've never made it back from all of those cuts. We're now 15 years later, and because of the very lean budgets that we've proposed over the years and past, and the tax cap, we don't have the luxury of the cuts anymore. And so the things, okay, I'll try to wrap it up. So the things that I mentioned about the non-mandated programs, it may include AP electives. It may include preschool, because preschool is not mandated for all children. There are a lot of things that I fear will change this district dramatically and will change the education for children for many generations to come, because it's much easier to cut it in terms of making it go away, but bringing it back and restoring will take, I believe, generations, as we have seen, and I mean it sincerely. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Rachel, then Dr. Hines.
So my initial concerns about this budget, I think, were, this is not the budget of a dreamer. This is a very reality-based budget that was necessary for the times, and I believe we've done our best here to balance very difficult competing concerns. I want to echo something that Mary said earlier, Mrs. Callahan, because I thought it was perfect. She said the board has done its best to make sure that the cuts that happen don't impact the children who are served by the district or the people who are providing that education to the children, or something close there too. And I thought that was perfect and that's accurate. Our priorities here were making sure that the educational program was impacted as little as possible, and that our teachers and our staff were impacted as little as possible, because we understand that to provide a great education for the children, you need those people. That said, my biggest concern about this budget is the amount of uncertainty that surrounds it. We've been put in an impossible position by the timing of the pandemic and the various orders that have come down from the governor. And a budget is usually something that you want to be creating on solid information. And we have a lot of question marks. And a lot of people have spent a lot of time trying to make sure that this budget takes into account those question marks and tries to have different avenues open to us depending on what happens. So, for example, what I'm talking about is we don't know if we're opening or not in the fall. Will the fall bring an opening with increased expenditures and mandates for safety things that we need to do that cost money? Will it bring a decrease in state aid at the same time? Or will it bring that we are staying closed? And if we're staying closed, will we have lower costs, or will there be other higher costs? So to plan a budget on the kind of uncertain ground that we were on is very uncomfortable. That said, I really do think that we tried our hardest to make sure that we have a little bit of a wiggle room, a padding, something to fall back on. I hesitate to say the word padding because there's really not an inch of padding in this budget. But that $500,000 that we took that was extra from our transfer from our reserves was meant to be in the budget in case we need it. It is not to provide for anything specific that we are planning on spending on already. It's hopefully to give us a little bit more ability to react to more cuts from state aid if they come down without having to go immediately to cutting things that we don't want to cut, because that's the point we would be at this point, as Emily talked about.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hines, Nora, Larry, and Beth. And again, a reminder, guys, because we have lots of other questions. Let's really try to be brief.
No, I'll keep this short and sweet. Aside from what everybody else just said, the process itself, the fact that we can't go to a second vote, I think is alarming. That's the process. So if there's one thing I'm really, really concerned about, and I've said this before, it really has to do with the mental health of our students when they return, and certainly the families that have been impacted by this pandemic. And I don't think anybody knows what to expect when our students, and they will come back eventually, but what trauma and what stress they have been under, and what we have to do, what we must do to make sure that they are okay. And again, not just the students, which of course is our number one priority, and our families where our children come from, but also our staff members as well, as far as what they may have been through. So that is something, someone asked a question about, the pandemic, the allotment, what it's used for. Yeah, $500,000. May seem like a lot of money, but potentially, from an equipment standpoint, we have those things, but we also have the mental health concerns that we need to be really prepared for. Thank you.
Thank you. President Johnson. Please unmute yourself, Nora.
Okay, the TV is too loud. I had to mute. I want to thank the person who asked, the community member who asked the question, and I also very much support the concerns that my colleagues have. I have to say, if I had to pick one item that concerns me the most, it's that as much as we've tried, and I think as much as possible we have struck a balance between the desire to keep the quality of the education great for our students and not affect the students in their education, and balance that with the concern that we have about the community and the financial need. We live in a community where many people have grown up here. Many people went to Schreiber who are now my age or older. And people love this town, and an integral part of the town has always been the school, and people come back and they bring their kids back. And what I'm concerned about is, given the economic crisis and how it has impacted so many people, that there may be people that, as low as we've gone, and I don't think we could have gone lower this, with this budget, I am concerned that there are people that are going to feel that as much as they support and support our schools, that they may not be able to support the budget. And that concerns me. And that's not because we didn't budget right, and they love education, and it's not because they're not concerned about the social contract and their kids went through, and now a new generation of kids is coming up. It's because of COVID-19 and all of the uncertainties, and that does concern me, because I really want to see the school prosper. And as we said before, the contingency budget would hurt the district. And I guess we just have to wait and see, but that's the concern I have.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Larry, you're up next.
Okay. Besides what everybody else is saying, since I've been on the board, one of the priorities we've been working on is closing the achievement gap. And we've done a lot of work toward it. And my fear is that the minor cuts that we make or anything else disproportionately might affect those people, and we might start backsliding in terms of who can achieve and who can't achieve, especially as we take away if we have to take away any extracurriculars or things like that. The families that can afford to provide those for their children will get something, and the families that can't afford will not. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Larry. And last but certainly not least, Vice President Weisberg.
Thank you, Dave. My first and biggest concern is the continued forward motion of our capital improvement projects, which I think are just so critical that we don't fall behind. We're all living what happens when that is not given priority status, and that will happen should our budget end up in contingency. So that's my first concern. We really need to take care of these roofs and other maintenance projects around the district so that we don't end up having much more costly projects later. So that's concern number one. Concern number two for me is that we were having very serious conversations about adding mental health staff to our district. And I really do believe that not following through with that is going to be harmful. I think we need more mental health staff, and I really do think that we're going to need it even more going into next year after this year. And unfortunately, we were not able to budget for that. So hopefully the community remembers that next year so that we can continue to move forward with those initiatives.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for sharing your concerns, and thank you, Rachel, for that question. Next question, another one from Hank Ratner. Is teacher absenteeism a problem that requires $700,000 for substitute teachers in the budget? And to answer that, I will turn to Dr. Hines or Dr. Shields. You guys can do that.
Sure. I'll start that first, and I think Mary, in some information that she just shared, it's not 700,000. I think it's around 640,000. But regardless, I think there's a balance between staff being absent, and then there's professional development aspect as far as why we have that take place during the school day. So that certainly counts as far as the need for substitute teachers. So yes, we have teachers and staff and administrators who are absent, but I know we're specifically talking about teachers. But I think the other side of that coin certainly has to do with the fact that we do have a lot of professional development that takes place throughout the year during the school day, and that is part of where that money goes as well.
Thank you, Mike. Ms. Callahan, you can unmute for this one. Beth Silfin asks, a few years ago, there was a bond issue of over 70 million, as I recall. Pretty positive it was under 70, but I'll let Ms. Callahan answer. In broad strokes, where did that money go, and has it all been allocated? So, Ms. Callahan, again, the question is around the bond. Where did that money go in broad strokes, and has it all been allocated?
It was just under 70 million. It was 69 million and change, as I like to say. The money has not all been allocated, but I would say that over 50 million of it has been allocated thus far. We started with the high school. There were multiple projects done at the high school and the middle school. Both buildings had their science rooms renovated and their auditoriums renovated. We did multiple turf fields here on Campus Drive. I'm saying here as if I were in the auditorium instead of sitting in my kitchen right now. We put STEAM labs in 2 of our elementary schools. We put additions on the Guggenheim Elementary School and Manor Haven, multiple classrooms and all-purpose rooms. We have plans up the State Education Department for the cafeteria expansion, technology expansion at the high school, the pre-K brick and mortar space at the Daly Elementary School. I'm sure I have left out many other projects, but in general sense, part of the debt service for those projects does appear in this budget. We are doing temporary year-to-year borrowing, and we'll be going out for a bond hopefully in 22-23, which is the year in which our bond from 2001 falls off of our debt service.
Dave and Mary, do you mind if I just have a quick clarification here?
Sure.
For it.
Mary, I just wanted you to speak clear because I think her question is really how we're able to spend that $70 million. So if you could clarify how we must use bond money as far as using it for what we.
Sure, I didn't understand the question that way, but yes, I can see how it would be. When the community authorizes the expenditure of funds for a bond, that is a totally separate fund from the general fund. And those funds can only be utilized for the purpose the community voted to approve. So if in fact we wanted to take money from that bond and say, let's not do a renovation of the Sousa Auditorium, and let's use the money for the Salem roof. No, we cannot do that. That is written in the law, and it's carefully monitored.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan, and thank you, Beth, for that clarification. Lee Heather is back. If schools don't open in September, what happens to the money allocated and passed in the budget? I'm going to repeat that, and to be clear, I'm not clear, Lee Heather, on the specifics of your question. But your question again: if schools don't open in September, what happens to the money allocated and passed in the budget? I'll start, Mary, if you want to fill in the gap after I answer. The money in the budget is there regardless of whether we open the school buildings in September. School will be open even if the school buildings are not, and we will continue to educate our students in the best way possible using the budget that we pass, which hopefully, Kinahara, as we say, or knock on wood, the budget passes. Mary, anything you want to add there?
Simply that the same as any other year, if there are unexpended funds at the end of the year, that goes into the district savings, which we refer to as fund balance. And that fund balance is then used in a subsequent year to reduce the taxes as much as possible on a future year's budget. For example, this year, with this budget, the board is taking $1,580,000 out of a savings and unassigned fund balance of $5 million to offset some of the taxes, with the expectation that, as Mrs. Johnson said, we will get state aid, which will pay for another $10 million of the program we have proposed. And if the 10 million is reduced by $1 million, then it would be the board's decision to determine whether they felt comfortable taking 1 million more from savings, or whether they would have to look at the existing program and determine how to cut $1 million.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan. Hank Ratner is back with the following question. Was the firm BBS involved in determining the need to replace roofs? We've involved quite a few firms to make absolutely certain about the roof work. BBS,
but not BBS. So let Mary answer.
Thank you, Mary. You can answer the specific.
Actually, about 18 months ago, the board authorized the district to take on a second architectural firm to do anything other than bond work, and it was this different architect who has talked to the board and walked us through each of our roof sections throughout the district when each of those were put on, and the relative remaining life of those roof sections and the cost to replace them.
Thank you, Ms.
And-
Kelly.
Dave, just to be clear, it was an RFP process that we went through to choose the new architecture firm, just for anybody who wasn't paying attention at that time 18 months ago.
Thank you, Ms. Weisbrod. Mr. Ratner, in a word, no. Kate Hirsch asks, has Governor Cuomo indicated any willingness to review the issue of unfunded mandates if school budgets don't pass, and perhaps give the districts more leeway if they are faced with the need for cuts? If only, Kate Hirsch, has Governor Cuomo indicated any willingness to review the issue of unfunded mandates if school budgets don't pass, and perhaps give the districts more leeway? Certainly not that I know of. Is anyone else on the call? No.
Nope.
No. I would say no.
Yeah, we have a lot of capital
Not
notes.
so
I would say
far.
just the opposite. He'll probably give us more restrictions.
Thank you, Larry. Rachel, I'm going to read your comment because you asked the question that we answered at great length, and it's a compliment. So I'm going to read it with my discretion. Appreciate, Rachel Pedicini wrote, I appreciate your honesty, candor, and work on the budget. And I have said this before, but to anyone who hasn't seen this, as I begin to wrap up my term of 3 years on the board, I will have nothing but the greatest of admiration for Board of Education members and how tirelessly they work without any pay. It's just absolutely incredible. And so I appreciate your kind words. As well as Beth's kind words. Thank you, Beth Silphin. And Lee Heather asks, remote learning preparation ? And I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm guessing related to your previous question. It's very hard to guess in this case, Lee Heather, but perhaps you're asking if the schools don't open, can money be used for remote learning preparation? Again, I'm sort of grasping at straws, but if that's what you're asking, I will say that we are most certainly using professional development, which is in this year's budget and next year's budget, to continue to prepare teachers for the remote teaching and improving their ability to use technology to engage in remote teaching. Dr. Hines, would you like to add anything to my answer there?
Yeah, I agree, Dave. It's the remote learning has so many different edges attached to it, of course, with price points. But, as I think Mr. Radner asked before, too, from a technology standpoint, there's preparation as far as, making sure we are where we need to be. And I believe actually ahead of the curve when it comes to September. But then I think there's the added edge of the plan itself. And before this meeting, late this afternoon, I was speaking to Ryan Maloney, our Director of Technology, to Dave Maloney. Dave Maloney, I'm making up names now. Dave Mioli, who is sliding into WAPA's position as Assistant Superintendent, as an interim for curriculum and instruction. And we had our really robust meeting. And actually, one of the things that came up, and I think it came up before, was, the leasing versus purchasing of technologies, and then looking through the curriculum that we currently have. So there's a whole lot of different edges attached here to the remote learning plan. But to answer the question from the community member, yes, preparation is taking place right now.
Thanks, Dr. Hines. And she asked as a follow-up by computers, and again, that would be something that we would in fact and are in fact looking at to answer your question. And I do not see any new questions, so I will turn the floor back over to you, President Johnson, with the note that as an FYI, I do have, again, a play out song for us.
Well, that is great news, Mr. Kerpen. I want to this will conclude the meeting. I don't know when our next, we had said before about the next scheduled meeting.
It's June 9th. It's June 9th.
Yeah, well, it's June 9th. Okay, so.
We just don't know what time yet, I believe, right, Mary? We don't know if we will be doing the regular 10 p.m. or I think at one point discussed doing an 8 p.m., right? We had said maybe do 8 p.m.
How could we do that though, if you're counting the ballots on June 9th? Would that,
I think we're going to wait to determine the time for the meeting as soon as we had some sense, because we should have budget ballots coming in up until June 9th. So we will see. We may convene June 9th and then have to reconvene the next day. I think we have to just be
open?
flexible with that.
Yes, we'll be flexible because it is very important to everybody and exciting in its own way to see how it goes. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and those who asked questions, thank you very much for your thoughtful questions. I hope that the answers were helpful. If you have additional questions, you can certainly email the board and we will either answer them or direct them to the best person who can give you a response. Okay, so with that said, stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to vote. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Oh my God.
That's what I'm
Okay,
talking about.
everybody.
Port Washington, it's time to come together and lean on each other. Thanks, guys. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.